My name is Vorrath-Sein, Senior Diplomatic Attaché of the Calvary Collective, and I am going to tell you the story of the single most terrifying day of my professional career. And I spent 14 years stationed on Graxon 7, where the locals eat raw plasma coils for breakfast. So, that should give you some context. It started, as most catastrophes do, with a meeting. The Grand Galactic Assembly had been running smoothly for 462 years. 462 years of structured debate, formal protocol, carefully rehearsed speeches, and absolutely zero surprises. The Vorkai chaired every session. The Delphoon handled trade arbitration. The Missari controlled military oversight. Everyone had their lane, everyone stayed in it. The galaxy, as they say, was a well-oiled machine. De stender bun of sterby fortfernate, imenteri obliged for a seat. Now, I want to be fair. We had all heard about humans before the application arrived. The reports from the outer colonies described them as, quote, an energetic carbon-based species with unusually high pain tolerance and deeply confusing social rituals. The Messari military analysts rated them a Class 3 threat, dangerous enough to notice, not dangerous enough to worry about. The Calvary Collective voted to admit them, mostly because their home system sat at a critical fuel corridor, and nobody wanted to deal with the alternative. That was our first mistake. Our second mistake was underestimating what it means when a species survives. Ambassador Daro Vek arrived at the Assembly Hall on a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because the Calvary calendar marks Tuesdays as days of moderate cosmic significance, and I remember thinking, standing at the entry arch, that perhaps the universe was being sarcastic. He was not what I expected. I had reviewed the briefing files. I knew humans were bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, roughly 1.7 to 1.9 meters tall. I knew they had these small flat faces, these forward-pointing eyes, these bizarre flaps of tissue on the sides of their heads for collecting sound waves. I knew all of this. What the briefing files did not prepare me for was the smile. Daro Vek walked into the Grand Assembly Hall, surrounded by delegations from 47 star systems, standing beneath a ceiling carved from the bones of dead suns, and he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a diplomatic smile, not the careful calculated expression of a species that understood it was very, very small in a very, very large room. He smiled the way a predator smiles when it has just realized it is the most dangerous thing in the area. I made a note in my personal log that evening. The human ambassador smiled today. I do not know why, I am concerned. The opening session began with the traditional recitation of collective grievances. Standard procedure. 47 delegations, 47 lists of complaints, 3 hours minimum. It is, in the words of my predecessor, the galaxy's longest, most boring, most necessary ritual. Humanity was assigned the final speaking slot, as all new members are. A formality. New members typically offer brief introductions, express gratitude for admission, maybe pledge cooperation on a minor trade clause. They do not traditionally alter the political landscape of the known galaxy in their first 12 minutes. Daro Vek stood up. He adjusted the translation collar at his throat, glanced at his notes once, put them face down on the podium, and looked out at the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations. Then he said, I have reviewed the collective grievance logs for the past 60 years. The hall went quiet. Not polite quiet, genuinely unsettlingly quiet. I noticed something interesting, Vek continued. And that smile was back. That quiet predatory thing that lived at the corners of his mouth. 12 of the 17 ongoing resource disputes in this chamber stem from a single unresolved boundary agreement signed in the Vorkai Accord of the Third Age. The language in Article 9 is intentionally ambiguous, not accidentally, intentionally. Someone in this room knows that. Several someones, I suspect. I turned to look at Ambassador Prellus of the Vorkai. He was very still. Vek kept talking. I also noticed that the Delphuni-Sari trade route conflict, which has been deadlocked for 22 years, would resolve cleanly if someone simply acknowledged that Waypoint Sorath 6 was never formally ceded, only leased. The lease expired 11 years ago. The Delphuan representative made a sound. It was not a happy sound. I am not accusing anyone, Vek said pleasantly. I am simply noting that humanity has spent the last 4 years since first contact, reading your history. All of it. Your public records, your archived debates, your published legal frameworks, your academic journals, your conflict reports." He paused. "We are very thorough readers." Silence. "We would like to propose," Vek said, "a comprehensive resolution framework for 9 of the 17 outstanding disputes. We have drafted preliminary language for all 9. The documents are available now in the Assembly archive." He picked up his notes, tapped them once against the podium, and looked directly at me somehow out of the entire hall. "We are of course open to negotiation." He sat down. For approximately 11 seconds, nobody in the Grand Assembly Hall made a single sound. Then everyone started talking at once. I wrote in my log that night, "The human ambassador spent 4 years reading our history before he ever set foot in this building. He walked into the most powerful political body in the galaxy and opened with a comprehensive legal brief." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I wrote one more line. "We have made a very significant mistake." I did not sleep that night. This is notable because Calavori do not technically require sleep the way humans do. We enter a low metabolic rest cycle for approximately 2 hours, and we emerge fully restored. Clean, efficient, predictable. I spent 6 hours staring at my ceiling instead. This was, I later understood, the first sign that humanity was already changing me. By the following morning, the assembly was in full emergency mode. Not the dramatic kind of emergency. Not alarms and evacuations and fleets scrambling at the border. The quiet kind. The kind where 47 delegations are suddenly sending priority messages back to their home governments, and the hallways of the assembly complex are full of hushed conversations that stop the moment you round a corner. I had been in politics for 31 years. I knew what panic looked like when it was wearing a formal diplomatic robe. Ambassador Prellus of the Vorrath-Sein caught me near the east corridor before the morning session. He was a large creature. The Vorrath-Sein, 7 feet of gray-blue scales and centuries of quiet authority. He had personally overseen the collapse of 2 star alliances and the construction of one. He was not, in any meaningful sense, a being who was easily rattled. He looked rattled. "Vorrath-Sein," he said, without greeting, without preamble. "Tell me everything you know about the human." I told him honestly. "Less than I thought I did yesterday." Prellus made a low sound in his throat. "He is one diplomat. From a species that has been spacefaring for, what, 140 years? 138, I said. "And he walks in here and dismantles 60 years of carefully maintained legal ambiguity in 12 minutes. 11, I said. I timed it. Prellus looked at me the way very old, very powerful beings look at you when you have said something that genuinely disturbs them. "Find out what he wants," he said. "Find out what humanity actually wants from this assembly." Because that speech was not an introduction. That was an opening move. He walked away before I could respond. He was right, of course. It absolutely was. I requested a private meeting with Daro Vek that afternoon. He accepted within 4 minutes, which by assembly standards, where scheduling a bilateral conversation typically required 3 weeks and a formal written petition, was practically instantaneous. He was waiting in the neutral conference suite when I arrived, seated relaxed with a ceramic cup of something hot in his hand and an expression of polite interest on his face. Like a being with nothing to hide and nowhere particular to be. I sat across from him. I pulled out no notes. I decided on instinct that notes would be a mistake with this particular creature. "Ambassador Vek," I said, "I represent the Kelvari Collective and I will skip the formal language because I suspect you find it as tedious as I do." He smiled. "I appreciate that. What does humanity want?" He looked at me for a moment, not calculating, more like appreciating the directness. "A fair seat," he said. "You have a seat. You were granted full membership. A seat at the table is not the same as a seat in the conversation," Vek said, and his voice was pleasant and even and completely utterly serious. "For 400 years this assembly has been managed by the same 6 species in the same rotation of power. The rules were written by those 6 species. The dispute resolution frameworks were designed by those 6 species. The trade corridors, the military oversight protocols, the arbitration clauses." He sipped from his cup. "All of it. By the same 6. That is because those 6 species built this assembly." "They did, Talus." Vek agreed, easily. "And they built it to benefit themselves, which is honestly a very reasonable thing to do. We would have done the same." He set down his cup. "But humanity is here now, and we have read every document this institution has ever produced. and we have identified 43 structural clauses that actively disadvantage species admitted after the founding period. He paused. 43. Attaché Vorrath-Sein. We have proposed fixes for 9 of them. We have drafts for the remaining 34 whenever the assembly is ready. The room was very quiet. You came prepared, I said. Finally, we came having done our homework. Vek said. There is a difference. Prepared implies we anticipated a fight. Homework implies we simply paid attention. I studied him. This small, warm-blooded, forward-eyed creature sitting across from me with his ceramic cup and his quiet smile. A representative of a species that had discovered faster-than-light travel less than a century and a half ago. A species that had nearly destroyed its own planet twice before it reached the stars. Why the legal route? I asked. You have a military, a capable one from what the Messeret analysts say. Why not leverage that? Vek looked at me with something that might have been amusement. Because military leverage gets you compliance. He said, legal leverage gets you precedent. Compliance ends when the threat ends. Precedent lasts forever. He picked up his cup again. Humans play long games, attaché. I thought about that for a long moment. The other founding delegations will resist, I said. Prellus alone has the political weight to stall your proposals for a decade. Probably, Vek said calmly. You do not seem concerned. I am not. He looked at me with those strange forward-facing predator eyes, and that smile was back, quiet, patient thing. Because in the time it took us to have this conversation, my staff has already begun private meetings with the 31 non-founding member species in this assembly, the ones who have been sitting on the disadvantaged side of those 43 clauses for a very long time. He paused. We asked them if they would like to co-sponsor the reform proposals. I stared at him. 31 species, I said. 31. He confirmed. We have 22 confirmations already. I sat with that number for a long time. 22 co-sponsors before the second day of their first session. In an assembly where building a coalition of 4 took months of careful, expensive diplomacy. You did not come here to join the assembly, I said, slowly. You came here to restructure it. Daro Vek set down his cup one final time. And he looked at me with an expression that was warm and genuine, and absolutely, completely, terrifyingly certain. We came here, he said, to make it work the way it was always supposed to. I filed my report to the Kelvari Collective that evening. I used careful, measured diplomatic language, as I always do. But the final line I wrote was not careful or measured at all. The humans are not here to participate in galactic politics. I wrote. They are here to win it. And the worst part, the part that I cannot stop thinking about, is that they are not wrong.